Hey guys, so this is what if Deku was a cowboy in the Old West. Now guys, basically I did a little bit of a commentary, basically asking you guys, or I posted something asking you guys, pretty much should I make what if Deku had the Ultimatrix Part 5, or should I make what if Deku was a cowboy in the Old West Part 1? Now, two guys, the only people that actually answered were pretty much, so they said one. Definitely one, and I guess one. Those commenters. Now, basically, yeah, so pretty much this is a what if I got an idea because I just saw, or a day ago, I saw basically The Higher They Fall. And it's an amazing movie. You go and watch it on Netflix after you do this video. And basically, yeah, so let's get into it, guys. Enough talking, no chit chat, and yeah, let's get into it. So after this video, it will be like my last video this week. But basically, next week I'm gonna be uploading 4 what ifs, 2 Young Justice, and 2, My Hero, kind of like this week. So I'm gonna be doing that. Also, this week I am gonna be uploading at least 3 action figure or skits each week, or pretty much maybe even each day, because I'm kind of trying to get back on track on that. And also, I'm gonna be uploading my stop motion I've been working on for about a week, or about not even a week. I finished it in like 5 weeks. Then I couldn't get voice actors for it. I actually forgot about it for a month, and now I'm uploading it probably next weekend or this weekend. So let's get into it, guys. So basically, this what if Deku was a cowboy in the Old West, Part 1. We start our story off with Asuka Midoriya, or how this would happen, or how Deku would be born in the Old West. Now, pretty much, we'd see that pretty much Deku would have pretty much would have pretty much been in the Old West. In the Old West, in this version, the Old West would have had their quirks would have evolved in the Old West in small fractions. Basically, only about 10% of the world's population having quirks in the Old West time. Basically, what I see that pretty much Deku would have been born to a very, very famous gunslinger and a type of bandit to be precise of some sorts. Pretty much Deku's father would have been a sheriff, but Deku's uncle would have been a bandit. Basically, Deku spent most of the time with his uncle since his father was always doing his job around the parks, and also pretty much was Deku's mother was a cowgirl, and pretty much Deku never really had anybody around. He started to feed himself, take care of himself, and most of the time he only spent time with his parents on holidays and stuff like that. And basically, Deku mainly just saw his parents when they came home to go sleep, or sometimes since these did stay on the road, so they didn't have to leave their job or what they were doing that time. And pretty much, you see that pretty much Deku would have grown up surrounded by guns. His father had a whole collection, or a whole straight up stash of guns, ammunition, and also a bunch of cowboy gear, like cloaks, hats, and also a bunch of pouches and pants and boots. Now, Deku would have admired being a cowboy, a bandit even, just being out there on the road, being somebody, knowing his name. Now, when Deku was about 13, he would have gone to kind of a, trip with his uncle. Pretty much his uncle would have been pulling off a type of a bank heist, if you would say. Basically, him pretty much running out of the bank with with 2 big bags of money in his hands. Him telling Deku to get the horse up. He would have jumped on the back of the horse, telling Deku to go, and Deku would have drove the horse off. Deku wearing a bandana around his face, no one knowing who he was. Deku would go back to the pretty much town they were at, and pretty much Deku's father or uncle would have told Deku, "Good job." Basically, him giving Deku a couple bucks, him saying to use that for yourself, kid. Basically, him walking off and him telling Deku to get off his horse. If Deku would have got off the horse, his uncle would have rode off out of town, for somewhere else, and pretty much Deku would have gone back to his house. Now Deku would have laid down in his bed, or not laid down in his bed. He would have laid down in his bed, thinking about, well, how this is all gonna go down. Well, pretty much how his life's gonna be when he grows up. Is he gonna be a cowboy like his mother? Is he gonna be a sheriff like his father, or a bandit like his uncle? He never really knew, but that would change a couple years later. Now, we see that Deku would have been around the town, basically spending some time with other kids. Basically, the other kids being in this universe being pretty much Bakugo, Ochaku, and pretty much Denki. And pretty much these two kids would be born in the Old West. As they were playing, we would see that pretty much at that point, as they were playing, you would see that their quirks would have activated. And basically, during this time, quirks obviously were like signs of being something supernatural, or being a devil or something. I don't know. Basically, pretty much quirks being, well, pretty much outlawed in the Old West. And this would be the first couple years, that quirks would actually start to manifest around the world, around the Old West. Now, basically, we see that Deku, his quirk would have manifested right after a couple others would. Denki would have been on, the seesaw, basically him jumping up and down, playing with Ochaku, and basically Ochaku would have started to float, and Denki would have started to electrocute the seesaw, basically shocking another kid that was normal there. Basically, we would see that Bakugo would start to look around, basically him seeing that many explosions were coming out of his hands. And we would also see that pretty much, we would see that pretty much Kirishima would have, backed up, being kind of scared, but he would have fell onto the ground and would have almost cracked his neck on a rock if his quirk didn't activate and, crush the rock underneath him. But basically, we'd also see that Deku was looking around, being kind of confused, and then Deku would have saw something he'd never seen in his life. He would have saw everything. He would have seen everything. Pretty much Deku's quirk would have been all sight, or not all sight, but pretty much, God's sight. Basically, Deku being able to see thousands of trillions of miles around him, outside of the Earth's solar system, out of Earth itself, out of the universe, the multiverse itself. Deku being all omnipotent, him not knowing about everything else, but him knowing that he could see a 360 around him at all times. Basically, Deku never being able to sneak on, miss, or anything like that, since Deku had perfect eyesight, perfect vision, and perfect senses now. Basically, him being able to hear thousands of times higher than a bird or a dog can ever hear, and him being able to smell incredibly fast, and smell incredibly strong, and pretty much him being able to pull off incredible feats of sight, and pretty much just pure precognition. Also, his reaction time was godly now. So basically, Deku pretty much was, he was given a quirk that basically made him the ultimate gunslinger. Because pretty much Deku's reaction time, and also Deku could never be snuck on or could sneak attack, since he always saw what was around him, no matter what. Even in his sleep, he would have a dream, or his dream would mainly just be him in his spiritual form, by far, or a spiritual form, somewhat. Basically, a scene that Deku would have seen himself all night when he slept, meaning that Deku would never be able to be snuck on, only when he was distracted or he wasn't using his quirk. Pretty much, we see that pretty much the kids would have been kind of confused. The only thing you could see that Deku's quirk, or you see that Deku's quirk was working, was when his eyes turned completely green, like they glowed green. That's what happened with Deku's quirk. Basically, we see that Deku would have been looking around, and most of all the parents' kids would be disgusted, scared, and also very terrified of what their kids could do. Seeing Kirishima's mom look at him like that, Kirishima was shocked. And all the kids were about 13 or about 11. Basically, We see the kids' parents or dads would come out watching and seeing what they were doing, seeing what they are, and would have, well, even though they were parents, they started to retribute against them, started to put pitchforks up and chase Deku and his friends out of this town, telling them to never come back ever again, and stay there or go back where you came from, you demons. Them thinking or them not accepting what was different. And what would happen at that point, Deku would have been on the run. They would have split up. Basically, the only two people that would keep up is pretty much Deku would have stayed with Kirishima, or he would have became close friends with Kirishima. Before Deku left, pretty much as they were getting hunted around or getting chased out of the town, Deku and Kirishima, since they're the only ones that were still, together or stayed together when they started to get ambushed or started to get, pretty much retributed against, Deku would have ran into his parents' house, and their parents wouldn't be there, and he would have grabbed all the gear from his father's base or his father's treasure trove. Him grabbing a duffel bag or just a spare empty money bag and putting all the guns, ammo, pouches, pretty much cloaks, coats, boots, pants, everything. Him getting dressed up in a fit similar to kind of just not like this in the picture, but similar to kind of a normal cowboy fit that people would have underneath their cowboy outfits, like a vest, white shirt, and cowboy boots and pants. Pretty much Deku put on a old cowboy hat that his grandfather had. Now he would sprint off, Kirishima grabbing some of their gear as well from his father's cabin, basically them passing by his father's cabin as well. Him grabbing kind of, a suit from his father's cabin as well, or an outfit from his father's cabin as well. They would have sprinted off, and basically, we see that pretty much Deku and Kirishima would have, well, gone on their journey to find somewhere that they can be. Now we switch a couple years later when we see pretty much a green-haired boy pretty much running away from the police, shooting back at them, basically saying this is going to be awesome. Basically him sprinting on his horse and him jumping off his horse onto a train right next to them. Basically him fist bumping a red-haired boy. The red-haired boy taking out two pistols, getting on top of the train and taking down multiple of the police or multiple of the pretty much sheriffs there. Basically, Deku's saying this is going to be the best heist we've ever pulled off yet. Now, basically, they would have crashed off because this railroad or this pretty much track wasn't built and it went off of a cliff. Pretty much Deku telling Kirishima to get off, and pretty much us seeing that these, grown, teenage boys, these 16-year-olds, were now, bandits. Pretty much very famed bandits and robbers. Pretty much Deku jumping out of the train in the last minute alongside Kirishima, and then falling on a cliff edge right next to where the crash site was. Pretty much the police, or pretty much the people that were chasing them, thinking that they're dead, and then riding off. Deku and Kirishima would have taken out the ropes that were in their bags and would have climbed back on the cliff and would have, found their horse and would have rode back to their base. Basically, their base being a kind of a old town that no one went to that was nearly designated. I was only had about 10 residents there. Basically, Deku and Kirishima would have went to a big type of cabin area and basically would have went in there and would have started to, talk about how the heist was awesome. And Bakugo would have said that, and Deku would have said that it was awesome. I put off so much stuff. The guys didn't even know what was coming at them. I asked to pull out alone, took out my trusty pistol, and they were shocked out of their minds. Basically, Deku, bragging about how the heist was so easy. That basically, we said Kirishima and Deku would have started to talk, and we would see, or a flashback of pretty much us seeing that they would have grown up, pretty much being passed on to other bandits over time, and Deku eventually coming across his uncle, and his uncle helping him get by and helping him know what was going on and helping him how the world works. Now, pretty much, we see that Deku would also lose faith in his uncles, and his uncle ratted him out when he was about, let's say, about 13, and basically he was very angry at his uncle. Now after that, Deku and Kirishima would have gone their own path, pretty much finding this town, going on bandits heights, pretty much becoming kind of a Old West Robin Hoods, and basically just becoming straight up just known people around the Old West. Basically, Kirishima and Deku going up, Deku, their names going in, the books as the gunslinger, Azuku. Basically, Japanese names weren't really a thing. Deku's actual name in the Old West would be pretty much Deku Iku. Deku Iku, kind of like similar to that, but just turn his name more Americanized. Basically, we see that pretty much Deku would have gone by the name Deku in the Old West, and Kirishima would have gone by the name of Riot, the gunslinger. And basically, you would see that pretty much they would have been very big known bandits and gunslingers and robbers and kind of Robin Hood like, you know, cowboys and Old West, people. Basically, them being kind of, known around the world as very popular people. Now, basically, we see that Deku would have told Kirishima that I think we got some mail. Basically, him going to the front of the desk, seeing that it was a note, seeing that it was a note from his old friends from they were kids. Him being confused on how they found him. Us seeing that it was Denki. Basically, they would have thought it was a trap, since a lot of people have tried to kill them ever since they left the town, and ever since they started to become gunslingers. But basically, Deku started to walk out of the cabin, trying to figure out himself, and Kirishima following after him, getting to their horses. But would have seen that some sort of, weirdo or punk from another town was trying to test his luck against Bakugo, and this against Deku. And this kid was pretty small, about 14, and we would ask, pretty much Deku that I'm a new gunslinger around these parks, and I'm gonna take you down without a shot with one bullet. Basically, I'm pretty much unloading all the bullets on the ground and him putting one bullet into his pistol and looking at pretty much Deku telling him, "I'm gonna take you out and I'm gonna become the new best gunslinger in the Old West." Basically, Deku said, "Not the best, but I'm one of the strongest." But I have to say, kid, you got some guts. It's not about the guns. It's not about how fast you are. It's about if you're ready to actually lose your life. Basically, Bakugo. Oh no, sorry, Deku. Sorry, Deku just walking off, not really caring about the kid. The kid would have taken his, pistol and would have said, "You gotta stop right there, buddy." Basically, Deku saying, "Just call me a buddy, kid." Basically, the kid would have said, "What is it? You chicken?" Now, Deku would have not taken lightly to be even called slightly cowardice at all, let alone being called a chicken. Even being called something worse than that would immediately get you a bullet between the eyes. Basically, Deku would really not to kill a kid, but he would have said, "Okay, kid, ready to die?" Basically, the kid would have said, "What do you mean? Are you?" Basically, Deku taking out his gun and shooting a bullet right past the kid's cheek. Basically, the kid being kind of confused on how fast or how Deku even took his gun out of his holster when his gun holster was literally on the back of his belt. Pretty much, the kid being very confused. Now, pretty much, Deku would have looked at him saying, "Kid, don't test me." But basically, Deku would have walked off with Kirishima, and Kirishima would have said, "You didn't have to just get a kick like that. You could have just walked away." And Deku would have said, "I'm not going to let no 14-year-old child call me a chicken." Now, they went into the, horses, and they went into they went to the address they were taking, or the, area they said to go. They went to the town, and they saw it was a very suburban type white town. Basically, them, riding around in it, them parking their horses, and then looking around. And pretty much, we would see that they started to look around, and we would have heard some sort of big, after they arrived there and they were looking around, they heard big gunshots and explosions. They would have gone around the corner, and they would have seen a yellow-haired boy with a black streak in his hair, basically shooting up the other, pretty much, police, pretty much the police getting tased, but also getting shot at the same time. Denki over time finding out a way to actually electrify his bullets and also his guns. Basically, he would have started to, ride his horse backwards, his body facing the police and shooting them, and his horse riding off, passing by Bakugo, Deku, and Kirishima. Passing by Deku and pretty much, well, Deku and Kirishima. Sorry, I like to keep on saying Bakugo. I'm sorry, guys. Basically, you see that pretty much Deku would have taken out his pistol, pretty much shooting at all the pretty much police with one bullet. Basically, him saying so uncultured and just unprofessional. Deku being kind of confused on what happened. He recognizes the red and green hair. Who wouldn't? And basically, he stops his horse immediately, getting off of his horse and running towards his friends, hugging them. Pretty much before Kirishima can hug him, before Denki can hug him, Kirishima drop kicks Denki down to the ground. Kirishima tells Denki to chill out. We're not that close, and plus we're just childhood friends. And pretty much Denki says, we're not childhood friends, we're best friends. Pretty much Deku would have said whatever. We got your note. Why do you need us here? Basically, Denki would have told him that I need your help. Bakugo's in trouble. Now basically we see a flashback of pretty much Bakugo and Kirishima. Bakugo and Denki being, pretty much the ones that, or the only other ones that stayed together after the whole entire, retribution against the town against them. Now, pretty much Denki said, when we were pulling off a heist, or trying to help some bounty hunter stuff, basically Deku saying, well, wait, hold up. Would have said, hold on, wait. Deku would have said, hold on, wait. You're saying you and Bakugo are bounty hunters? Basically, Deku saying, yeah, maybe Bakugo does most of the, interrogation and also most, getting, the jobs done. Pretty much, Deku would have said, when we were doing one bounty hunter mission, we went up against a guy that had a power like us. And Deku would have said, a power? You mean like what we have when we like what we have now? Basically, Kirishima is saying it is possible. One year ago, we saw somebody with a bird head and some sort of shadow behind them doing a lot of gunslinging, and the shadow was holding a pair of guns. And basically, we see that Denki says, "Oh, you mean that other kid? I don't remember his name, but I do know that he did do a lot of gunslinging 1 year, and he went off the radar for the rest of the whole entire, century. He's been gone. He's been off the radar. No one's been talking about him for years." Basically, Deku who said, "Yeah, kind of suspicious, but whatever." So you're saying you guys went up against a bounty hunter or somebody that was on your bounty hunter list, and basically they had a power. They voted you, and Bakugo was taken capture or you were separated. Pretty much, Deki says no, they didn't vote us. They caught us off guard. We didn't get voted. And Deki would have said, you didn't. Okay, so why do you have a bruise on your chest? Basically, Deki having his collar button, basically a really big black bruise on his chest. And Deki would have said it's not a bruise, it's a burn. Pretty much, he would have told him the guy that was our target had really weird marks and burns around his body, and he shoots some sort of he just shoot blue flames towards us. Bakugo was pushed back out of the building, out of the bar we cornered the guy into, and basically I was drop kicked in the chest down to the table and knocked out. Luckily, no one grabbed my gear off of me when I was knocked out, but yeah. Basically, Deku would have told him that, okay, so you did get flooded. You got dropped like an omelet. So we got that cleared out, right? Okay, yeah. So basically, Bakugo would have, Bakugo, after he was kicked out of the building or the bar, Bakugo got back up, and basically, we see that pretty much Bakugo would have been kicked out of the bar. Basically, him taking out an axe and chucking it right towards the guy. Now, pretty much, we would see that the blade or the axe was completely disintegrated by the burn or by the fire. Basically, the guy saying the sentry did in there. Well, let's just say I'm not an easy one to take care of. Basically, Bakugo saying, I'm not an easy one to get rid of either. Him making an explosion in his hands and him throwing, or pretty much him holstering his guns in the back of his coat. Basically, the only gun Bakugo had was a shotgun since he liked the explosions. And also, he didn't have any other guns since, he had explosions, so he didn't really need them. Basically, we see that, Bakugo would have said, you want to know a trick I had over the time? Him taking out a bullet and him saying, have a nice day. Him pretty much chucking the bullets and having a little bit of explosion after he chucks them, making the bullets set off and fly towards pretty much, fly towards Dabi. A scene that pretty much Bakugo's hands were like makeshift guns. Basically, Bakugo saw the bullets fly, and he threw about 10 bullets at once. Basically, Denki dodging out of the way. I mean, Dabi dodging out of the way, and making a huge firewall where he dodged out of the way, making the bullets hit the firewall. He would have ducked down over the cover that was, on the outside porch of the bar, and basically he would have shot fireballs towards Bakugo, and Bakugo would have started to dodge most of them, him throwing explosions towards the fire, him being pushed back after he did that. Now Bakugo would have taken out another throwing axe and would have thrown about 2 throwing axes straight towards pretty much Dabi. Dabi would have disintegrated him like they did the other ones, but a third one would have came up and stabbed Dabi in the foot, right on his, not in his foot, but right between his big toe and his other toe. Basically, Dabi being very lucky in how his toe wasn't completely cut in two. And pretty much Dabi would have, slid his shoe out of the thing and pretty much would have looked at him. Now, Dabi would be wearing the same outfit he wore in, the canon since it was similarly Western, but basically, the belt would have been replaced with an old-fashioned, Western black belt, and his boots would have been replaced with a pitch black version of cowboy boots without the whole tire, pretty much, the whole tire thing on the back of the boots. Basically, Dobby would put on a type of a black hat in the front porch, saying "See you later." Basically, him throwing a huge tornado of fire around the whole town, basically blinding Bakugo for a short amount of time, and Denki running off. Denki would have ran off, and basically would have stopped him, realizing that pretty much these were the first people he ever saw with other powers. But on top of that, he was other people. He was the only other people he's seen other than his friends that had powers. So basically, he ran towards Bakugo and chucked him by his scarf and pretty much knocked him out with a really good old-fashioned solid punch inside the face, and pretty much dragged Bakugo down to his base. And pretty much we see that Denki would wake up, the bar would be on fire, Denki would jump out of the bar, and basically he would have looked around, see that Bakugo was gone, and his bag of pretty much, what was it? The bag of money they, took after the last, bounty hunter thing they had before this, basically was left behind. But basically, we would see that pretty much Bakugo was gone, and Denki was very confused on what was going on. Now, I would see that pretty much Denki would have said, so, Bakugo got captured, you got folded, and the guy you fought was extremely powerful. Okay. So basically, Deku would have said, okay, I can find Bakugo for you. Deku would have tried to use his quirk to try to find Bakugo, but Deku could only see things that are outside, or were out in the open, or where he was. So basically, all he saw was outside, desert areas, and he couldn't find where Bakugo was. Now, Deku would have said, so he said the guy had black hair, weird burn marks on his body, and could manipulate and make fire. Basically, Deku saying, yeah. So pretty much, Deku would have said, so let's just look for fire sightings and big, coincidences around the world that have powers and stuff like that. Basically, they would have gotten on their horses and they would have rid off in the sunset as they try to go on to the next day and find out what was going on. Now they were riding and riding, and basically they would have roamed through the town trying to get some food, and pretty much they would have came across a drawdown, basically against a purple-haired girl, and pretty much, some sort of random. And basically, we see that pretty much Denki would have went outside, basically watching it, and Kirishima would have went outside watching this, and basically Kirishima would have watched closer, and basically the purple-haired girl would have said, "You really want to do this?" Basically, the guy would have said, "Yeah, I do." Him about putting his hand on his pistol, saying, "Let's do this." They would have walked, back, and basically they would have counted at three, and after three, the guy was gone. And basically, before anybody can even recognize or even notice that the girl even took her gun out of her holster, the guy was already down, and they didn't even hear the gun go off. Basically, the girl having smoke off the gun barrel and saying that the guy was gone. Now, basically, you will see that basically Kirishima would be kind of confused and very impressed by this, and Denki especially. Denki would have walked up to the purple-haired girl and would have said, "So, who are you?" Her saying, "I'm Jiro." Basically, pretty much, they would have acquainted with Jiro, they would have bought her some drinks, and they would have, asked her, how did you pull it off? Now, pretty much, Deku was actually mainly, interested in how she pulled it off, how she shot that quick. No human or no person without a power could do that. And basically, pretty much, she would have said a power. I don't know what you mean. Denki making a little bit of electricity through his fingers, him saying, "I think you know what I mean. I think you know what we mean." Now she would have said, "So you're like me." Basically, she would have shut off her head jacks, and she would have said that she used her head jacks to basically shoot, pretty much, propel her head jacks towards the guy's face, basically imitating the illusion that a bullet went through him. Basically, her not even having to go for a gun, and basically, she just used a type of prop type smoke, but pretty much make the gun look like it went off, and basically, we just pretty much see that she asked, "So why are you here?" They would have talked about their friend being all the other stuff, blah blah blah, and all the other stuff. Basically, she would have said, "Huh, your friend Bakugo, right? I think one of my friends might know you, or might know you. Well, Bakugo." Basically, would ask, "Who's your friend?" And basically, they would have said, "Ochaku." And pretty much, they were kind of confused. Ochaku, haven't seen her in years. They would have went to their base, Jiro and Ochaku's base, and Ochaku would have been, pretty much, setting up ammo, all that other stuff, counting out money they got from other, not heists, but actually saving people in the town and being rewarded by that. And basically, Ochaku would have looked at him, or would have recognized Deku, would have hugged him, saying, "You're back. I haven't seen you in years. You're you're taller and you're older. You're really muscular." Basically, her grabbing Deku's arms. And Deku would have said, "Yeah, I'm more muscular now. Obviously, I'm 16. You are too." Basically, she would have said, "Yeah, yeah." And basically, she would have said, "So, what's going on with you guys? And why are you here?" And they would explain, the whole entire Bakugo situation, how he got captured by another person with a power. And basically, she would have said, "I thought we were the only people that had powers. There's a couple other people around the world, but I never knew people used them to, attack others like us. We made it kind of a code not to attack people like us." And basically, Deku would have said, "I don't really understand it, but I do know that we do need to do something about it." Now, we would see that pretty much they would have, gotten, a team together. Denki, Jiro, Kirishima, Deku, and Ochaku. And pretty much they would have, rode off trying to find out where Bakugo was. They would have rode off, and basically they would have came across a type of shootout, basically against two fracturing gangs, or pretty much, just gangs. Basically, they would have dug down and their horses would have gotten shot, or maybe Deku's horse would have gotten shot in the chest and would have died, collapsing on itself, and Deku falling under and his leg getting captured under his horse. Now the other people would have jumped out their horse, going for cover, and their horse would have ran off. Basically, Kirishima would have hardened himself and would have ran over to Deku, pushing the horse off of him, grabbing Deku and jumping him into a cavern, or not a cavern, but a hiding, space like a ditch. Basically, a rattlesnake would have came towards Kirishima, but Kirishima would have used his hardening to pretty much grab the snake and eliminate it. Basically, him looking around. Shooting would have gone out for about hours. Hours passed and the smoke cleared. Deku started to look around, peeking his head out of the hiding spot they were at. He started to look around and he saw the other gang, or the other side of the fight, torched, burned, defeated, and beaten. Basically looking around and seeing two of the people in the other gang having some sort of superpower, having some sort of power. The other person had some sort of, hand decaying power, because when Deku looked up, he saw the person decaying a body as he grabbed its head. He looked around and he saw another person, the same person Denki described as the firebending person, with burns on his body, and another third person. A third person with some sort of shadows coming from his body. And basically, Deku would have looked around, and basically he would have seen somebody running back at him, or running near him and his team or his crew. He would have took out his pistol and shot precisely right towards the person's chest or shoulder, and hitting that person down to the ground, wounding the person. That would give his position and his crew's position to the villains, or to the other power users, and they would have shot fire blasts towards him and everybody else of his team or his crew. They would have started to sprint for it and run for it. Basically, Denki getting burned in the back of the leg, getting wounded, and Jiro pretty much getting shot in the back of the arm. And basically, they would have been able to get it away because Kirishima grabbed Denki with his hardening quirk and basically started to, princess carry him back to back to the town. They started to walk for days. Basically, Deku looking around and finding out the best, way to go. Since Deku could see pretty much everything out of the outside spectrum and around himself, basically Deku never got lost. Now, Deku got to a nearby town that had a lot of ammunition, or had pretty much a cheap, fairly well ammunition spot, and Deku was low on ammo. So Deku got some ammo, and pretty much that's where pretty much they leave off their story, and we move on to another story, Bakugo and the villains. Now, villains would have a type of a cult type of thing. They would think that superpowered beings were the future, and no human should be left on the face of the earth. None. Basically, they're not even, straight up, none of them. Even if you were born quirkless, they would execute you immediately. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is the villains think that quirks are everything now, and no human should be left on the face of the planet. So that's why that other gang tried to take them out, since they didn't want to get eradicated because they're humans. So basically, you'll see pretty much the disintegrating hand guy. Since he wouldn't have any hands in his body, since it was the Old West, everything would look nice, he'll basically just have a really big black cowboy type cloak over his body, and a type of Grim Reaper type hood over his head, and a pitch black cowboy hat on his head, and also black gloves that could pretty much hinder his decaying abilities, because let's just say some quirk users are able to create objects or materials that can help people with their quirks. So basically, pretty much, he would have looked at, Bakugo. After he looked at Bakugo, basically, he would have told him that you are one of us. Why do you fight your own kind? Basically, Bakugo says, money, and also, he attacked me first. Basically, the person, or should I just say Shigaraki. Shigaraki reveals himself as Shiger, or Shindo. Basically him saying that you're hindrance to our plan has gotten a really big impact on our type of, well, expedition. Basically, he would say that we're trying to explore the world, try to find out every single person that has the power so we can get ties with them, so we can make an allegiance, so we can repopulate the world after we eradicate all humanity. Bakugo says, you're gonna eradicate all humanity? Are you out of your mind? Pretty much he would have said, no, I'm not out of my mind, but I am thinking clearly, and I know for a certain fact that humans are insignificant and unbalancing creatures. They only care about war, destruction, and death. We do the same thing, but at least we're more superior. At least fathom the imaginations of every person not being rebelled against, not being thought as monsters, demons, creatures from the down below. Imagine a world where everybody's accepted for who they are and what they have. Basically saying that, and even if you were birth a normal child, we'll just execute them. Basically, Kirishima or Bakugo being shocked by this, saying that you would execute a child if it didn't have a power. Shigaraki saying, yes, that's at least what my boss tells me, and at least what I do for my boss. Basically, I'm saying, who is your boss? And the same person that told you to go after my man, to go after my bro, not my man, sorry guys, I don't like that, but basically, go after my, well, most favorite and most strongest cadet. Basically, he would have said, Spinner, go after him. Go after the yellow-haired boy and the gunslinger that calls himself Riot. Basically, we will get switched off there, and that's how I'm going to leave it off here, guys. So basically, in part 2, Spinner will be coming after the team to try to assassinate them, and we'll go back, and we'll go, you'll see the rest of it in part 2, coming out probably near Christmas, or probably doing Thanksgiving, because I'm going to be doing about 4 parts of this, and then I'm going to be ending it off on a big type of cliffhanger, and then I'm going to be doing, another season of this, What If Daku Was a Cowboy, in the Old West, season 2, and basically, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and as always guys, have a blessed day.